You can get this book at riseofthemoors.org. Here's some of the table of content. So lesson 1, you're a Moor, origin and migration of Moors, and then questions. So each lesson has questions after it. So that way you can test yourself, test your children, and create some type of standard. My wife put in the chat, would I love her if she was a worm? I asked her the other day, would she love me if I was unlovable? And she said no. Wow. Anyway, the Moorish Lexicon. How many pages? 136 pages. Front and back, so it's not just single-sided. So it's really, a lot of paper. Anyway, first lesson is you're a Moor. We're going to do some reading of each chapter, I think. Lesson number 2, Moors of the West. Errors are feared in carbon dating. What is radiocarbon dating? The reliability of radiocarbon dating. Civics lesson. What is culture? Is America named after Amerigo Vespucci? Peace, Mafi. What the Moroccan movement is. The Moors of Europe. Latin, the language of the Moors. Lot and Moab. The identity of the Moor. So what can be said of Moab? History of the Moors in Spain. Well, that's not a chapter. The god of Moab is the god of Lot. Moors in Egypt, in the language of the Moors. And then this is all the stuff under it. Peace through the medium of war. Thomas Jefferson said that. The Geneva Bible has some references to Moors in it. What is nationalism? History of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Death of Noble Drew Ali. FBI espionage. And that's it. That would be the last chapter. 13 lessons. Did you upload that live yesterday to YouTube? To YouTube? No, I didn't. I didn't upload it to YouTube yet. These are some key takeaways from this book. Again, here's the book, riseofthemoors.org. Moors are the descendants of Moab, who was the descendant of Lot, who was the descendant of Shem, who was the descendant of Noah. So we see that Moors are Semitic. The major migrations of Moors to the west, one during the time of Joshua and another during the Egyptian-Persian War. All the continents were connected, so I talk about Pangaea. I talk about the Phoenician script and the Moabite script, and how the Arabic script is connected to the Moabite script, which is Demotic hieroglyphs, which is just a shortened version of hieroglyphs. Radiocarbon dating is accurate between 30,000 to 60,000 years. How we lost our identity. And just a little tidbit I thought was pretty cool. I made the buttons little fezzes, if you haven't noticed. Thomas Jefferson advocated for the unification of several European countries and the United States colonies to form a coalition against the Moorish Empire and put an end to the trafficking of Europeans by Moors. Moors have been identified as Moabites in history written by Europeans. Nationality includes culture and legal status. Anyway, I'm not going to read everything because that's a lot. But we see here lesson 1. You are Moorish American. It is your bloodline. You are a Moor because one or both of your parents have Moorish blood. This means they are a descendant of a Moor, just like you're a descendant of a Moor. The word Moor is short for Moroccan. So by saying we are Moors, we are also saying we are Moroccan. You can say, I am a Moor, or I am Moorish, or I am Moroccan. These are all saying the same exact thing. And then I give a little Arabic lesson. I am from the Maghrib, or I am from Morocco, or I am Moroccan. And then I give the English translation. Then I go over how Moroccans are descendants of Moab, the grandson of Lot, who was a prophet, who was the nephew of Abraham. They're from the city of Ur, Mesopotamia. They existed around 2100 BC in Palestine, which is also known as the land of Canaan. Abraham, Lot, and Moab are all Semitic. And I go over some of those things. And I quote Noble Drew Ali. And then there's questions. So if you're teaching your children, or if you just want to teach yourself, you answer the questions according to the previous lesson. So what is the estimated time that Abraham and Lot existed? That's around 2100 BC, and then the answer is right there. So if you have, children, you can... I have this as a PDF version, so you can print, each lesson if you wanted to, or have it on a computer, and then test your children on each lesson. And then if you wanted to as well, you could obviously read the book yourself, so that way, as your children get older, you can have them do more challenging things. So you can have them, do a 2-paragraph essay on each lesson, something that they've learned. Obviously, lesson 1 is pretty short, but for the longer lessons, you can have them do that. Why did Abraham and Lot leave Mesopotamia? And the answer is there in the cause of Allah. They both migrated to the Holy Lands of Palestine around 2100 BCE. So when we read the Quran questions for Moorish Americans, where Noble Drew Ali asks us, are we related to the people who are guarding the holy city of Mecca? The answer is yes. And then another question is, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali says we have the same mother and father. That's because Lot and Abraham are relatives, and Moab is a descendant of Lot. So that's how we Moors share the same parents as the Arabs, because the Arabs are descendants of Abraham through Ishmael, through Hagar. Abraham is the son of Terah. Terah also had another son called Haran, and Lot is the son of Haran. Wa alaikum salam. So that's how we Moors are related to our Arab cousins. The Moors of the West, this topic talks more about the radiocarbon dating and Pangea. And I reference what Noble Drew Ali talked about. And I wrote his name in Arabic if you're interested in learning it. But he talked about how Moors, our dominion extended from northeast and southwest Africa, across the Great Atlantis, even unto the present day North, South, Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands, before the great earthquake which caused the Great Atlantic Ocean. So he's talking about this. So our dominion extended from here to here before these two continents split up. And what's very, very, very profound about that is that most, let's just say most scientists say that human beings did not exist when the continents were connected like this. But Noble Drew Ali is saying that we did exist before the great earthquake that caused the Great Atlantic Ocean. Some scientists say Pangea existed over 250 million years ago, right? But when you look at radiocarbon dating, which is the radioactive decay of carbon-14, which is obviously an isotope of carbon, it's only accurate between 58 to 60,000 years. Wa alaikum salam. So how could something be 250 million years old if your method of measure is only accurate up to 60,000 years? Because after that point, the amount of radiocarbon, the amount of carbon-14 isn't sufficient enough for them to measure beyond that. And then I use things that are written by actual scientists that study this, so it's not just my personal opinion. So you can, these are questions I always had. So I did research to help other Moors answer these same questions. Because if our prophet is saying that our dominion extended from here to here before the Atlantic Ocean was created, well, then that means, if we believe everything that our prophet said is absolutely true, then that means most scientists who argue that Pangea happened 250 million years ago and there weren't human beings there, that means they're lying. So then when you look up, well, how are they dating this? And then you find radiocarbon dating, and then you find everything that I put in here that it's, let's see. In principle, any material of plant or animal origin, including textiles, wood, bones, and leather, can be dated by its content of carbon-14, a radioactive form of carbon in the environment that is incorporated by all living things. So you have to be a living thing. Rocks are not living things. And then you'll see other articles where they talk about the difficulty of measuring carbon-14 in rocks. So if they're saying that Pangea is 250 million years ago based on the carbon dating of rocks, but that method of measures has not only a certain amount of error in it, but it's only accurate up to a certain point in time, right? So we see here that some estimates of age based on carbon analysis were wrong by as much as 3,500 years. So by no means is radiocarbon dating absolutely perfect. Here's one scientist saying that there's an error of 3,000 years. And then here, the article continues to say that carbon dating is unreliable for objects older than about 30,000 years. So even within that number, you're looking at plus or minus 3,500 years. Right? So you can approximately measure 60,000 years, according to another article, but it's unreliable for objects older than 30,000 years. So past that 30,000 year mark, when you talk about things that's 60,000 years old, based on radiocarbon dating, you're off. This is according to the scientists themselves. And I have the links available, obviously. The links are there. But anyway, the various dating techniques all have limitations. Each works best for different types of problems. Radiocarbon dating works on organic materials up to about 60,000 years of age. A million-year-old sample contaminated by only a tiny amount of carbon could yield an invalid age of 40,000 years. One limitation is that radiocarbon dating is only accurate back to about 50,000 years. So we see three different articles. This one is saying it's inaccurate past 30,000 years. This one is saying it's accurate up to 60,000 years. And this one is saying it's only accurate up to 50,000 years. This one is saying after an organism has been dead for 60,000 years, so little carbon-14 is left that accurate dating cannot be established. So we can't even measure things past 60,000 years. So how are we going to say, oh yeah, Pangea was 250 million years ago? How many thousands are in a million? Right? Given relative pristine circumstances, a radiocarbon lab can measure the amount of radiocarbon accurately in a dead organism for as long as 50,000 years. After that, there's not enough carbon-14 left to measure. And then I connect how in the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the United States and the Empire of Morocco, we accepted Mexican dollars as payment. And then how during the Mexican War, the European colonists referred to the Mexicans as Mauritanian races and Moorish people, and how the land Mexico properly belongs to the Moorish people, which again is going back to Pangea, going back to the Olmecs, and going back to how radiocarbon dating is not accurate past 60,000 years, according to some scientists, and according to others, it's not accurate past 30,000 years. So this information is presented for us to teach our children so that way they can think for themselves and see that, it's cool to trust the science, but let's look at the data that all the scientists have gathered, not just one. We see that things past 60,000 years is inaccurate, right? Things past 50,000 years are inaccurate. There's a margin of error of around 3,500 years, right? So we have to think about those things before we just accept, Pangea was 250 million years ago, and then that's it. And then there's questions for that lesson. What does the word Aboriginal mean? Wow.
I was in the bathroom and I came to check on her. Remember I told you she took it off earlier?
Yeah.
I put it next to her, and then I went to go see her, and she was sitting, and I was like, let me see what you did on the potty, and she got up and messed. I gave her chocolate, and she sat back down a bit.
The questions for this lesson: what does the word Aboriginal mean? What is Pangea? What is radiocarbon dating? What are some of the limitations of carbon dating? What lands did the dominion of the Moors extend to? Who are the Olmecs? And of course, if you read this for yourself, you can create questions for your children for yourself. These are civic lessons. It breaks down things like what municipalities are, the Register of Deeds, how cities are divided into wards, Clerk of Court's office, City Collector's office, Public Works Department, zoning and code enforcement, the Board of Canvassers, and what city ordinance are. And then this, as a Moor, some of your civic responsibilities to your nation is, allegiance, taxes, military service, participation, and respect. And then what you get in turn for your civic obligation is governmental protections. Then, just 3 questions for this lesson. This lesson is clearly dated culture. I'm going to skip this. I do have some case law in it, but it's not as exciting as the radiocarbon dating, if you ask me. And then some of the questions following that lesson. Our nationality claims, also citizenship claims. This is very important, and that case law is obviously in the lesson. Is the United States the same as America? What is the Act of State doctrine? Are nationality and culture similar? What did Congress say about the 14th Amendment in 1967? What is the proper name of the Lenape Indians? And according to 8 U.S.C. 1481, how does one relinquish or lose U.S. citizenship? This one's very important, I believe. Is America named after an Italian? And this is relevant because there are Moors out there saying that we're not Moorish American, we're just Moroccan because the Europeans are Americans. And it's based off this belief that America is named after Amerigo Vespucci. And it's not. And I explain that. Right, so let me see. The name Morocco again comes from the Berber word Amaruk. So we already see America right there. Diminutive of Amarukuk or Amurakuk, America, which means land of God. It is the original name of Marrakesh. So that's where the word America is derived from. Let me see. Amerigo, a city of Africa in the kingdom of Fez. So is Amerigo based off Amerigo Vespucci? Or is it based off this kingdom or city of Africa? According to this website, the ancient Phoenicians were Moors, or a majority of highly melanated or dark-skinned people, and a mixture of some less melanated people, whose empire spans from about 1,500 BC to 300 BC. The Phoenicians were a Semitic language people, and I already went over how, again, Moors, right, because it says Phoenicians or Moors, are descendants of Moab, and they're Semitic. Why don't we have a day for who? Who are you talking about? Some questions. In Egyptian and Middle Eastern Arabic literature before the mid-20th century, what was the name commonly used to refer to Morocco? What Berber word is the word America derived from? And who are the Phoenicians? Someone said the Phoenicians is where you get a lot of these words from definition mention. Not sure what that means, but Noble Drawley said that we Moors are the mothers and fathers of civilization. So if we're the mothers and fathers of civilization, then of course we have documented the meanings and definitions of words. And of course, most languages have, a Phoenician root because we mastered phonetics. But anyway, this is about the Moroccan movement. This goes over a lot. I'm not going to read everything. What is the Moroccan movement? What does Levant mean? What does Maghreb mean? What does the Arabic word Sahara mean, or Sahra? And what does Africa mean? What does Saracen mean? Exactly, phonetics. This is about the Moors in Europe, the Renaissance. It's very short. Latin, the language of the Moors. This is very important because Moors say Moorish Latin. But it's not Moorish Latin. Because if that's the case, we would say German English. Or we would say Aramaic Arabic. We would say things like that. And here's a side-by-side of the Phoenician. And this is why they say Latin is the language of the Moors, or Moorish Latin, because here's the Phoenician script, and then here's the Latin script, and you can see their correlation. And then I also put the Phoenician script. Notice how this says Phoenician on this diagram, and this says Moabite on this diagram, and then when you compare them, they're exactly the same. You can get this on riseofthemoors.org. And I put this diagram because it shows the correlation to Arabic as well. Again, the Moabite script is the Mudar language, which is demotic hieroglyphics or shortened hieroglyphs. And just so we can have a better comprehension on language. And obviously you see correlations, obviously. Even in mathematics, delta is a triangle, which is very interesting. Like when you look at the change of entropy and like Gibbs free energy, they use delta G, the change of delta G, which is amazing to me. Anyway, just look at the script. Then I also have something. This goes over Spanish and Portuguese, I'm pretty sure. And then there's obviously everything in italic text is from another source, not written by me. But it shows the connection of Arabic and Spanish. Of course, Spanish being a Latin language, and then Arabic being a Semitic language, but both Latin and Arabic are derived from the Moabite language. So, of course, there's going to be similarities and influence of Arabic over Spanish. And we see here the Spanish vocabulary. All these words are of Arabic origin. All of these words. The influence of Arabic on the Spanish language. And then this right here is Portuguese. Portuguese. All right, so I just copy and pasted the original text in Portuguese. And then I used Google Translate with Microsoft Word, so that way you can see what it says in English. So that's the source. And it talks about the influence of Arabic over the Portuguese language because the Moors inhabited to the Arabian Peninsula where Portugal is, modern-day Spain, Al-Andalus. So Portuguese and Spanish have Arabic influences on them. I didn't put questions here. I'm not sure if I just forgot or what, but I didn't. This is about Lot and Moab. This part used to be free on the website. I just put it in the book because I just doubt that people were reading it. But it talks about the kingdom of Moab because when you look at, and this again partially why I wrote the book, because I was curious myself. But as we strive to study ourselves and our origin and who we are and how we got here, how we got to the Americas, again, which is why I go over Pangea and radiocarbon dating, is because there's not a lot of readily available information out there in English, which again is why I'm also encouraging Moors to learn Arabic, so that way we can read other things not written by Europeans and other things not translated by Europeans, so we can see for ourselves what we ourselves wrote about ourselves, which was in the Arabic language. Because right now we have to rely on European translations of things, or other people's translations of things who may not have the perspective that we have. So they might see things, translate it, and say, oh, look, these people were worshiping their hair because we wrote, how much respect and care we have for our hair, or something like that, anything like that. But if we learn the language of our foremothers and forefathers, which is Arabic, a Semitic language, then I think we'll be better off with digging ourselves out of this hole that we're in of intellectual darkness. So, in researching the land of who the Moabites were and are, meaning us, I kept finding that, I think around either 600 BC or 300 BC, 600 BC, that when the Persian Empire migrated towards the west and took over the Levant, which is modern day Syria, Palestine, Jordan. Obviously, Jordan is the land of Moab. They were essentially three separate kingdoms, and the Moabite kingdom was still intact since biblical times. But the kingdom of Moab had extensive relations with Egypt already. And when the Persians invaded, the relationship between the kingdom of Moab and the Persian Empire had changed because the Moabites tried to overthrow the Persian Empire. So whereas normally when the Persians would take over a country or land, they would allow some degree of autonomy. You just had to, give them troops, give them taxes, and pay your annual tithes to the Persian Empire. The Moors strove to resist that. And since our ancestors did that, the Persians no longer respected the kingdom of Moab as a sovereign, independent kingdom and forced the Moors to assimilate into the Persian society. Much like we see right now how the terroristic colonial state of Israel is trying to force the Palestinians to assimilate into them and no longer identify as Palestinians and no longer fly their flag and no longer speak their language. Not so coincidentally, it's happening on the same exact landmass. And during this time, around 600 BCE, that's when our people just were gone, essentially. We were erased out of the history books from that point forward. Up until when you start to read about the Renaissance, which I have some of the things in here, and some of the books on Egypt, where every once in a while, every here and there, our people would be referred to as the people of, or as Moabites, so the people of the land of Moab. So there was, a forced assimilation. But again, this is why in the beginning I mentioned how there's two major migrations of Moors from the Levant, from the plains of Moab, modern day Jordan, to the west. One, of course, was under Joshua, which was during the time of Moses, which was, we're talking BC times. I mean, obviously still 600 BC is still BC, but it's more recent. And then again, the second major migration was during the Persian invasion and war with Egypt. But obviously, we're dealing with human beings, and human beings, if you study that area, there have always been extensive travel of human beings from east to west through the Levant, so through the land of Moab. So obviously, naturally, Moors didn't just stay in their own kingdom. Obviously, Moors, they traded with surrounding kingdoms and surrounding areas, and obviously with Egypt. So there was traveling to and fro. Just like today, we have people that move to different states, move to different cities, move to different countries. And that, obviously, that's a human thing that eventually dispersed the people of Moab. So that way, obviously, not everybody was erased out of history. But anyway, so we see here, and obviously during times of war, people always flee, right? So I'll talk about the Persian War with Egypt. Talk about history of the Persian Empire, University of Chicago. Besides, the majority of the former inhabitants were still in Palestine. So during this time, during the Persian Empire, the former inhabitants of Palestine was still there, which includes the Moabites. And then I mentioned Noble Jar Ali, just affirming what he was saying. This book, The Tricolor on the Atlas, or Algeria and the French Conquest, we see the Moabites, or Beni Mozab. Obviously, Moab and Mozab are similar. Moabites. And we see rabbis believe that the Moabites are the descendants of the Moabites. the ancient neighbors of Israel, the offspring of Moab, son of Lot. Right, so we see that these Moabites settled in Algiers, right, confirming that there was in fact a migration of Moors from the Levant, from the modern day country of Jordan, to Northwest Africa. And look, we see here, Leo Africanus was a learned Moorish author. Interesting. This book right here, we see the relationship between the Moors and the Egyptians, which again, and then when you study the Egyptian and Persian War, you'll always see them reference the Lebu, who are a Moorish tribe. So this has always been extensive relations between Moab, or the descendants of Moab, and the descendants of Misr or Egypt. Christian let me see, what's the book reference? Oh, same book reference, just to make sure. Christian chronicles sometimes refer to the Almoravids as Moabites. There are numerous references to Moabites in the Chronicles of Alfonso, King Alfonso. The reference are to two paragraphs, and the reference of Ali and Texuphanus as kings of the Moabites would seem to support the theory that this term refers to the Almoravids. History of the Moors in Spain. I'll skip that part. And then this is very important to me because the god of Moab is the god of Lot. And I talk about how, we're told that the Moabites practice idol worship, and that they had a god that they called Chemos or Shemos or Chemos, variants of that. But what piqued my interest is that most of the time when you read about the gods of Moab, they only reference one. So they'll say the Moabites were idol worshippers, but then they'll say that, but then they only mention one god. They don't like if you talk about Hindu gods, they don't mention one. They mention all of them. They mention at least three, right? So they give you this idea of multiple. So I did the research, and seeing that it just means conqueror, which when you look up the 99 names of Allah, one of them is conqueror. So what I explain in this text is that I'm proposing that Chemosh or Chemos or Shemos was not an idol god that was made equal to Allah, but it was another name for Allah in the Moabite language, the conqueror. Just like we call Allah the most gracious and the most merciful. That doesn't mean that the most gracious is a separate God. That doesn't mean that the most merciful is a separate God. That doesn't mean that the conqueror is a separate God. That's just one of the attributes that we're calling the one God. And that's how I explain it. And let me see. So in Akkadian, Chemos means to submit or to bend. So we're submitting to Allah. We're bending our knee to Allah. Chemosh was equated with the Semitic high god El, one God. El is an Aramaic name for Allah, so we're talking about the same God. Right? And we see this Arabic word, kamasha, meaning to seize, to grasp. right? And we're told that during the end of times, Allah is going to take the world. He's going to seize the world in his hands. And I can't remember exactly what it is, but he's going to take the world in his hands. He's going to seize the world and say, O earth, where are your kings? Where are your gods that you made equal to me? So he's going to conquer the world, right? So this sense of the conqueror or the subduer, these are also names of Allah. And, right, so I explained here. In fact, when Jesus said Allah in Aramaic, it was pronounced Allah. I assert that Kamosh was not an idol was not an idol given partnership to Allah at the time of Moab, but it was simply one of the 99 names of Allah. One of the 99 names known today is Kahar, the ever-dominant, the conqueror. Does this mean that Kahar is a separate God given equal status with the one God, Allah? No, it does not. Right? So many things have been written about us that just aren't true. And this is my attempt to help us find the truth as to who we are. And one of the 99 names of Allah is Aziz, the conqueror. Al-Qahar, the conqueror, to conquer. And then when you look at Ammon and Moab in Jewish sources, you'll see that as an example. Let me see if I can find it. Ha-Levi also uses Moab and Ammon to denote Muslims. While Jepham explains Hagarite, Moabite, and Ammonite as a general reference to enemies in the exile. Roth argues that the text under discussion is surely an allusion to Islam, and that Hagarite, Moabite, and Ammonite stand for the Berbers particularly. Right. He fought back in 1110 by writing an anti-Jewish tract, in which, however, the fifth dialogue is against Islam. Here he wrote that Ammon and Moab honored the Kaaba. We see here, Ishmael sent for a wife from among the daughters of Moab. So this is just confirming how when Noble Drew Ali said we helped build the holy city of Mecca, this confirms it. These things confirm it. And then there's some questions. Here's another diagram of Mesha. Mesha has several meanings. One means plain, like the plains of Moab. Mesha was also a king of Moab. Mesha is also believed to be one of the original names for Mecca. And notice how they're calling this Phoenician Moabite script Mesha. And obviously, if you've read the Bible at all, you know that there's a king of Moab called Mesha. I think it's amazing. I don't know about you. This talks more about the Arabic language and the Moabite language and the Egyptian language, how they're essentially the same. Just several sources of that. History of the Arabs. The Romans called West Africa Mauritania and its inhabitants Mori, Western. English, Moor. The Berbers. We are the Moors proper. But the term was conventionally applied to all Muslims of Spain. That's a typo. I just copy and pasted this. Right. Golden Age of the Moor by Ivan van Sertima. It is significant to note that the term Moabitrium is very frequently used by medieval era European writers to describe the Moorish inhabitants of northwest Africa or Mauritania. Those who are familiar with the Quran, see how it's spelled with a K, and the Bible would recognize the reference Moab/Moabite. The descendants of Moab, the Moabites, were an ancient people who occupied a significant portion of Palestine. These two dynasties, the Almoravids and the Almohads, left very indelible impressions upon with regard to the earlier discussions concerning Moorish ethnology. It is interesting to point out that a Spanish synonym for Almoravid is Moabitia, which again draws our attention to the biblical people and the evident phonetic and historic correlation which the medieval Europeans made between the ancient people of the Bible and the Almoravid Africans. We might also recall another synonym for Almoravid, Moabit, Marabot, which phonetically corresponds to Moabite. This is the Reconquest, imperial authority during the reign of King Alfonso. So this is during the 1100s. These tactics, the chronicler tells us, contributed to an increased fear and dread of Alfonso by the Moabites and Hagarenes. Who are the Hagarenes? They are the descendants of Ishmael. Who is Ishmael's mother? Hagar. Who is Hagar's husband? Abraham. So during the time, the Moors and the Arabs were distinctly identified. Some good questions. What is the language of the Moors? Where is the original land of the Moors? This is kind of a trick question. According to this book, where did the Arabic language come from? Clearly, there's a typo. Fill in the blank. The Arabic of the Quran and of literature may be traced to the northwestern region of the Arabian Peninsula. The northern region is regarded as the home of the who, or of the blank language. According to the Chronicles of Alfonso, what is another name for the Almoravids? According to Egyptian Romany, did the Moorish Moabite kingdoms have contact with Egypt? According to George G. M. James, what relationship did the Moors and Egyptians have? So when Noble Drew Ali is talking about the dominion and habitation of the Moorish Empire, and Egypt is mentioned, there can be no doubt. This is Peace Through the Medium of War. This is about how the United States didn't have a navy. And when Thomas Jefferson became president of the United States, he wrote that the United States would have peace through the medium of war, and how they would not honor the Treaty of 1786, 1787. So the treaty's been broken, by the way. They declared war on us. So this is the full text of Jefferson's speech. And then here's some more things about the Barbary Wars. And I also have some case law. This is from the United States Supreme Court, I believe. At the time when this act was passed, Algiers was and had long been the capital, regency, or pashalik of some of the same name. One of the well-known Barbary states, a Mohammedan power, and dependent on the Ottoman Empire, from which empire Turkish pirates had issued in earlier days, establishing themselves as sovereign masters of the city of Algiers. During the Barbary Wars, Congress enacted legislation authorizing only limited military action against the Barbary powers. So Thomas Jefferson wanted a war, and he got it. This is about slaves.